clicked on this video, then chances are that you are considering trying to make a custom gauge mount, gauge pod, something for your vehicle. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. So the car in question obviously is not here. I'm not in a dungeon. I'm in the utility room in my basement. And it's a little cooler in here today. So that's where we're going to be working. But the car in question is my 99 C5 Corvette. And I need to find a place to mount my wideband. Now, initially, when I took all this apart, the wideband was mounted on the A-pillar in the car. The reason I'm not going back to that is I'm mounting two different gauges on the A-pillar, so I need to find a different spot for the wideband. Now, you might ask why not just get a gauge pod that will house 3 gauges. They do make them. In my experience, they fit like flip-flops at a job interview. Not very well, don't belong. They're a little bulky, kind of get in your blind spot a little bit. My buddy has a car with one. Just not a fan of the way it fits. So I thought I'd try something different, and I'll show you where we're going to mount that right now. Now, although what we're going to be doing in this video pretty much applies to any car with any plastic interior pieces, but if you happen to own a C5 Corvette, you know that the most useless part of that entire car is the cup holder. All right, does not hold anything. There must have been like a DOT mandate that cars had cup holders, so they just tossed it in there, but it's useless. You can't put anything in there. If you can get something to fit, all right, the minute you accelerate or hit the brakes, it falls out, your drink's all over the place. So I'm just going to get rid of it. Now, this is the center console out of the car. All right, cup holder is right here. This happens to be an aftermarket center console because I installed a doubled-in stereo in the car. So if you are doing this, your factory one may be a little bit different, but really after removing the cup holder, everything should be exactly the same. Now, the cup holder in question is actually held in with screws. All right, I think it's got 3 or 4 Phillips head screws in the back. So I'm going to start by removing that, and then we'll see what we have to work with once that's out of the way, see where we need to make our plate to fit. We're going to end up gluing it in, and then we'll mold some filler around there, sand it, paint it, and hopefully it'll look like it came from the factory that way. So let's pull this cup holder out and see what we're working with. Cup holder's out. Like I said, just 4 Phillips head screws. And now we have just a wide open hole where I want to make the panel for this gauge. And to help with tracing, using Hard Healthy Honey Nut Cheerios. But I'm just going to use a piece of this box. We're going to put it underneath, trace it out, and then we're going to transfer what we trace out to this piece of ABS plastic that is typically designed for switch panels or making interior panels, such as we're going to be making. All right, one side has a little bit of a grain to it, other side is smooth. We're going to be doing the smooth side up, because right now this aftermarket center console is smooth. It does not have any grain. This is going to end up getting painted, and we're going to use filler and sand it down so it all kind of meshes, but I would rather not have to try and smooth this out, so just flip it around, use the shiny side. So I'm going to cut a piece of this cardboard box out. I'll lay it up flat up against, trace it out. I did end up buying extra sheets of this ABS plastic for 2 reasons. Number one, if I happen to not go through it all trying to make something work here, I can use it for another project. Or if I, measure never and cut 6 times, then I'm not ordering another piece and waiting for it. All right, so pretty simple. That's the piece, and we'll pretty much just push it up to where it is flush against here, and then we can transfer the outline from the cardboard to the ABS. So I have my template cut out of the cardboard, or traced out on the cardboard. I'm just gonna, just like in kindergarten, we'll follow the line. We should have a nice, well-sized piece that should fit inside that hole. And then we can transfer this to the plastic. I'm sure it's going to take a couple times to get it to fit perfectly, but hopefully this will help us get it close. And then we can figure out where I want the gauge on this flat panel. And we'll probably go out to the car, position it in there so that I can make sure that I can see it from the driver's seat. Again, it's going to be mounted a little bit lower. It's going to be right to the right-hand side of the shifter. But I think we should be in good shape. And obviously before we make anything permanent, I'll test fit everything. I'm gonna make sure this fits in the hole. If it does, we will start working on transferring it over to the plastic, and then I'll make a mess in here, cutting that with my cutoff wheel. I am noticing now that towards the back of this, the plastic kind of contours up a little bit, so it's not completely flush. But I believe if I need to make any contours in this plastic, I can probably heat it up with a heat gun a little bit. And kind of just persuade it into the shape that I need. So I'm sure there's going to be more than one of these cuts made, which is perfectly fine. That's why I bought extra. But let me transfer this over, and we'll get our plug cut out, and then we'll start working on fitment. All right, so what I'm doing now, you can see that slight contour on the end, is just taking my heat gun, applying heat, and trying to mold it basically to fit the contour of the center console. Because like I said, it's not perfectly straight. So I got the one corner, it looks pretty good. I might have to bend it back a little bit. Good thing with plastic is that it's pretty malleable. Once you get it hot again, you can kind of reform it and, you know, just keep tweaking as you go. So I have one more slight contour to put right where my thumb and index finger are. It kind of bulges up a little bit there. So I'm going to see if I can kind of bend that into place. And then got to shave a little bit more around the edges so it sits flush. But once I'm done putting the last couple contours in this, we'll do a test fit and see how it looks. I got the patch cut out, kind of conformed to the way I want it. There are some gaps here and there, but between the plastic bond and then the flexible filler, we should be able to fill those spaces in and then sand it to where hopefully it looks completely seamless. So I'm going to open up the plastic bond. We'll mix some of that up on the remaining cardboard. I'll glue that up. I think it takes about 6 minutes to set, so I'll do my best to hold it in position for that amount of time. And then if we need to, we can kind of heat and bend from there. So the stuff is supposedly pretty strong, so I'm going to glue probably 3 sides in, make sure that that fits well, and then the last section, once this stuff cures, which takes about 30 minutes, I should be able to kind of mold it as needed. So I'll mix this stuff up, we'll get it glued in, and I'll bring you guys back when that's in place, and then we'll see what needs to be tweaked. One thing I did forget to mention, the patch, all right, I sanded down all the corners to get it nice and smooth. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of rough up the surface a little bit of the center console, just so when the adhesive is applied, it's got a little bit of a better bond, because if you try and glue to the smooth surface on there, I'm assuming it would still hold, but I want it to be as strong as possible. So not going to go crazy, just scuff it a little bit, rough it up a little bit, and should have more surface area to actually adhere to. Okay, we have our plug plastic welded in. All right, did the front and the back side, so that's super secure. So now what I'm going to do is we're just going to knock down these edges a little bit where some of the adhesive kind of like bubbled up a little bit. So we'll knock those down, make them smooth. I'm going to hit this entire area with 80 grit. All right, clean that off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start mixing our filler, which is meant for plastic bumpers, really anything that's flexible. So that stuff is a pretty fast set time. They say it's sandable in about 15 minutes. So we'll do a couple coats of that. We'll mix a small batch, apply it, sand it, so on and so forth. And then hopefully we can get that thing worked out nice and smooth. I should have some black plastic and vinyl dye coming in the next couple days. So we can shoot this thing, get it in one color, and then go from there. But for now, let me get to sanding. Once we get that pretty close, we'll bring it out to the car, kind of position where I want that wideband and the gauge ring to be, so it angles it up close to where I can see it, and be one step closer. So let me get to sanding. Got the first round of filler on and sanded. See, I have a couple of low spots in here. Overall, pretty happy with the shape. It matches the contour pretty well. Sanding inside the corners is definitely a little tough and time consuming, but so far I'm happy with how it looks. So I'm going to mix up another batch of filler, very, very small. We'll try and take care of some of those low spots. I might try and work on the contour in here a little bit. I have a couple of curved sanding blocks that I'm using to try and get in there. We'll see if we can smooth that out a little bit more. Did another thin coating, sanded that down. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to rinse this off, clean it with some acetone. We'll actually lay the first coat of primer on there, just because I feel like it might be a little bit easier for me to see any low spots or anything like that when it's all one color. So clean this off, run it outside, shoot it, let it dry, and then we'll see if it needs one more coat. Hopefully it doesn't, but I have a feeling it's going to. All right, so first coat of primer's on. Definitely need some touch-ups. A couple spots that I missed that looked good and felt good, but once I got the primer on there, I was able to see the inconsistencies. So I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but there's a few spots. So I'm actually going to spray it with the black real quick, and almost use this sort of like a guide coat, I guess, just because I think the inconsistencies will be a little bit easier to see if it's black rather than the gray. So I'm going to do just that one section. We'll spray that, let it dry, and then I'll bring it back in a little bit and reapply some filler to the trouble areas, and then hopefully this thing will be ready for its last coat. Okay, so I obviously painted this last night, but we still have a few more spots to take care of. You can see that line, there's a couple divots, and then this edge here, I could have sworn that was smooth when I ran my finger over it, but obviously with the paint on there, we have a little bit of an imperfection. So I think I'm going to mix up another small batch of that flexible filler. We're going to reapply it to the trouble areas. This piece here, I might try and sand because I don't really want to add too much more filler. Not that there's a lot on there, but I might try and blend that a little bit more. We'll fill in this line here, and then we'll prime it again, one more coat of paint, and hopefully we'll be in business after that. Okay, did the hopefully final round of sanding. Marked out where I want this little angle ring. It's going to go right about there. I traced out a mark that you could see with Sharpie. So now I'm going to open that hole up, and then we'll work on gluing the angle ring down, making a retaining device for the gauge. And then hopefully we can probably add a little bit of filler, maybe just to try and blend this in to the rest of the console. And then maybe one or two more rounds of sanding, and then hopefully paint this thing for the last time, and then we can fit it in the car. So let me open that up and come back, glue this on, and see what the next step is. All right, so I have the gauge angle ring glued on. I'll show you guys that in a minute. We're going to mix another batch of filler, and I'm going to do my best at attempting to kind of smooth that angle ring into the rest of the center console, which, based on how the first round of filler went, I'm not really too confident, but we're going to try it anyway. So let me show you guys what we got. Angle ring is glued on, and then gauge will go in there somewhere like that. I know the angle here looks a little awkward, but I did test fit this in the car. When you're sitting in the car, it's actually pretty easy to see. So should work out pretty well. So let me mix some more of that filler up and see if we can make this kind of look like it's one piece. Okay, I put the first coat of primer on here. Just set the gauge in there to see what it looks like. There are a few spots that I want to hit with a little bit of a finer grit sandpaper. Some like light sanding scratches in there and a few imperfections, but overall I think it looks pretty good. I think it flows pretty well. Doesn't look too out of place, kind of looks like it belongs there. So I'm going to pop the gauge back out. Again, hit that with some finer grit sandpaper, work out some of the imperfections, and then we'll probably end up doing one more coat of primer, and then we can shoot this thing black and see how it looks inside of the car. Okay, got our final coat of paint on there. Last thing we have to do is mount our gauge, which I'm going to show you how we're going to do that right now. Now, because we're doing a angled gauge ring, the depth is too much for these studs to reach. So once you put it in there, all right, these two studs sit below the surface of where we need to clamp it down to. So what I came up with for that was I bought these small plastic spacers from Home Depot, and they are just about the right size that I can fit that over the stud on the back of the gauge. And as I turn it, it almost cuts the threads inside the plastic. Now again, this doesn't need to be super secure, but I can get it a couple of turns, and then I actually have to turn it in with a pair of pliers. Not to the point where I'm worried it's going to pull the stud out of the back of the gauge, but just enough where they should be secure enough where they're not going to pop off, and will keep that gauge centered and where I want it in the angled ring. So I'm actually going to cut this in half, and then I bought 2 screws that are the same thread as the back of the gauge, those studs, and then we'll use the factory thumb screws. So basically what we're doing is we're just kind of moving the threads further away from the back of the gauge, and that should give us a nice basically anchoring platform. And I'll show you once I cut this down and mount it with the 2 bolts. Also, if you're wondering, the screws, the thumb screws, at least on the back of an AEM gauge, are 4mm by 0.7, I believe. Odometer gauges are 1032, I think. I was kind of hoping they were the same. They are not. They have coupling nuts for 1032, nothing for 4mm, at least not at Home Depot. So that's why we're going with the plastic spacers. But I'm going to cut this down. I'll get that on the gauge, and I'll show you where we're going to go from there. Now, looking at this from the back, you can see how those 2 spacers, all right, kind of bring those studs out a little bit further. And then I have some 4mm by 0.7, so the same thread size. I'm going to put into the other end of the spacers. We'll cut those down, and then I'll be able to use the thumb screws that came with the gauge to secure it to the actual console. All right, so I just drilled out a piece of aluminum flat stock for the back, and I was able to secure that with our modified studs, and nice and secure in there. And back in the car. Excuse the mess because I'm still working on the interior. Like I said, we're mounting that dual gauge pod with the boost and fuel pressure over here. But for now, my new center console mounted wideband is in the car. I think it looks pretty good. Like I said, when we were looking at it in the basement while I was working on it, the angle is kind of weird. But from where I'm sitting, I could see it perfectly. Even with my hand on the shifter, it's really not in the way. And like I said, we won't be missing the coupler anyway because you couldn't put anything in there. So I think it looks pretty good. It doesn't look too out of place. I'm pretty pleased with how this came out. So I have not run the wires to it yet. Like I said, this was wired up in the car previously. I have everything for those over here. I have to pull that wiring back, trace it over, and obviously move the connections over here to where the gauge now is. But I'll wait to do that until after I have the cluster back in the car. And I'll probably combine some of the wiring for the gauges on the A-pillar to come on with the key with the wideband. So that'll be another video, installing these gauges, wiring everything up. But, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully you like the way it came out. Like I said, I'm pretty happy with it. If you're interested in more C5 content, please consider subscribing. Like I said, we have a lot more work to do to this car. Gauge-wise, we got to put the interior back together. And hopefully in the next couple weeks, we'll be getting started on that blower install. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you very soon.